A while back, I did a video about NES games that I hated as a kid growing up. One of the games I mentioned in that episode was Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. Most of my reasons were pretty much a rehash of the same complaints everyone else had about this game over the last few decades, but to sum up my annoyances from my own perspective as a kid, it's pretty simple. The game was confusing and I never knew where to go or what to do. This game was a rental for me, so there was no manual, and my subscription to Nintendo Power didn't start until Volume 21, well after Nintendo Power covered the game in Volume 2. There was no internet back then, and I was like 7. There weren't a lot of options for NES rentals at the small town convenience store in the town that I used to live in, but with no manual, I seriously just had no idea what was going on, though. I had no idea that hearts were currency, how to buy stuff, and what all it could be used for. Plus, most of the hints that you get in-game from other characters were pretty cryptic, if not just blatantly wrong, due to programmer intentional red herrings or translation errors. So, I always felt like this game should be awesome, but I just never could get anywhere with it as a little kid, and that made me frustrated and sad. But it's been a few decades, and with the help of some modern conveniences and the internet, I'm finally going back and giving this game the proper attention that it deserves, and I have to say, this game really is pretty freaking fantastic. Okay, so the story for Castlevania II picks up 7 years after the events of the first Castlevania. In the year 1698, Simon Belmont, his back still seriously injured from the first fight with Dracula, is visiting his family's resting grounds when suddenly he's visited by a young woman. The woman tells him he doesn't have long to live. When he defeated Dracula the first time, Dracula put a curse on Simon, and as such, he will die if he does not revive Dracula soon. So now Simon has set off across Transylvania once more to find all of the pieces of Dracula's body, then take them back to Dracula's castle, resurrect him, and then kill him again, hopefully this time for good. So you pick up as Simon setting off to explore Transylvania and find the 5 pieces of Dracula's body that are scattered across the land hidden in 5 different mansions. Along the way, you'll have to talk to townsfolk for clues, battle hordes of horrific monsters, and find items and special weapons to help you out on your quest. In a departure from the first series, the game takes on a completely non-linear approach. You can move freely in either direction, and occasionally you'll come across branching pathways as well. Going one way might lead to a town, while another might lead to a mansion or something else entirely. This is where I always got tripped up as a kid. I simply didn't know where to go or what to do, and like I said before, when I rented the game, it never came with a manual. Well, the manual is actually pretty helpful. For instance, it explains what all these numbers mean in the menu, such as time of day, how many hearts you have, and your experience rating. Yeah, I had no idea that you could actually level up your character in this game because I never got that far. The more hearts you collect, the higher your experience points go, which increases your health meter. And it also explains that hearts are used as currency to buy stuff from vendors you encounter throughout the game. Now, this is one of the bigger complaints I see about this game, is that you basically have to farm for hearts so that you can buy stuff, but in practice, it's really not that big of a deal. Just look for one of these areas where you can meander back and forth with respawning enemies that are easy to kill. And once you get through the first mansion, where there are much more powerful enemies that drop large quantities of hearts, you should have plenty to buy everything you need as you advance through the game. A good rule of thumb is to just buy everything you can in whatever town you come across, even if it means you have to hang out in the woods for a little bit and farm some extra hearts. Plus, if you do still have to farm hearts, you've got one of the greatest soundtracks ever in the history of ever to keep you going. Seriously, the soundtrack to Castlevania II: Simon's Quest is just epic. It's easy to forgive some of the game's faults when you've got such an incredible track list of music to listen to. I didn't mind just taking 20 minutes to slash enemies and listen to Bloody Tears on a loop. It's one of the most iconic video game tracks ever. Well, okay, there is one thing that is really annoying. The game starts you off with 3 lives. The good news is you've got infinite continues, and it basically just starts you right where you died, so that's pretty cool. But the bad news is, if you have to use a continue, or if you're using a password to pick up where you left off, you go back down to 0 hearts. That just kinda sucks. But as you find special items along the way, rather than having to use hearts every time you use that item, you can just use them over and over again. Like when you buy holy water, well, now you just have holy water and you can toss it as often as you like. More on that in a bit. So that's pretty cool. It's not like this for every item. A couple of the more powerful daggers as well as a few other items do still consume hearts on use though. So you'll wander around chatting with townsfolk, buying items from shops or finding them in hidden areas, and then eventually you'll find a mansion. It's a bit confusing at first finding your way around in this game, game, but looking back on it now, it's really not that bad. Sure, it would have been nice if they included a map in the US version of the manual like they did in the Japanese version. Even if it's pretty basic, something like this would have been very useful, but you would have had to buy Nintendo Power to get that stateside. Really though, if you just kind of draw a map as you go, try one of the branching pathways, and if that seems like a dead end, go back and try the other one. I mean, the game kind of nudges you along in the right direction. In fact, when you start out at the first town, you're supposed to head east from the town. If you try to go west, nope. Huh. Well, I guess we're going east then, kids. Another big complaint is the day-to-night transitions. Every 12 hours in the game, it transitions through a day-night cycle. I think it comes out to 1 second in real time equals 4 minutes of in-game time, so you do the math with that. Once it transitions to night, the towns are overrun with zombies and the enemies outside of town are way stronger. I always thought this was a cool effect, actually. It just adds to the spooky atmosphere of the game's subject matter, and it's like, damn. I really don't want to have to go back outside at night unless I have to because it's dangerous out there. It can be a little annoying though, because unless you're keeping track of the time, it can happen at some really inopportune moments, like right in the middle of a precarious jump. Also, the whole process when the message pops up takes a full 10 seconds. Ugh, what a horrible night to have a curse. So, full disclosure, most of the footage shown in this episode is actually from a ROM hack of Castlevania II: Simon's Quest. Someday I need to get into a deep dive on ROM hacks and what all the really cool ones there are out there, but basically the short version for those that have never heard of these mysterious things, a ROM hack is a version of a game with the code modified in such a way that one or more aspects of how the game works is changed. Sometimes they go all out and completely randomize levels or item locations in the game, such as with the Zelda games, or they add entirely new levels to explore, and sometimes they keep the baseline game completely intact and just add a few quality of life improvements. That's the case with this version of Castlevania II that I'm playing called the REDACTION. This was created by the Almighty Guru, and I'll put a link in the description for more information. This version of the game cuts the day-night transition from 10 seconds down to 4 seconds, and also fixes a few of the more frustrating aspects of the game, such as the nonsensical, poorly translated clues that you find from townspeople. Yeah, now when you talk to folks, it actually gives you some helpful information that makes sense. It's still not perfect, like if you get to mashing buttons too fast, the clue is just gone forever, but it's still a massive improvement, and it makes it to where you could reasonably get through this game without having to resort to a full-on walkthrough or wiki page. And that's helpful because some stuff you just never guess on your own, like kneeling at the lake with a specific item to drain it so that you can go through a different path, and of course kneeling at this dead end with another specific item to summon that infamous tornado. Looking back though, even at the original version of the game without any modifications, this is a pretty incredible experiment in gaming considering the time that it came out. This was released by Konami in 1987, and they made it completely different from the previous version. Yeah, that was a thing on the NES. A lot of the sequels to popular games were totally different than their predecessors, and you have to applaud them for taking chances and trying something new and unique. You know, like so many modern video game franchises. This form of non-linear exploration would eventually go on to serve as inspiration for what most consider to be the best Castlevania game ever made, Symphony of the Night, thus coining the term Metroidvania. Even in the modified version of this game, there are still some other annoyances, such as the fake-out platform blocks in the mansion that you can fall through. You can find these by tossing holy water every other step, which technically works, but it does get a little old. And some of the shops are even hidden under blocks too, even ones that sell items you have to beat the game. Basically, you just have to go around chucking holy water everywhere to see if there's something hidden. But, you know, I can forgive that because like I said before, at least they were trying something new with this game. They can't all be perfect. So yeah, Simon's Quest really is just a fantastic game, and any hate this game received is not deserved. With the non-linear gameplay that varies greatly from the original Castlevania, the excellent graphics showing off all sorts of unique areas to explore, and one of the greatest video game soundtracks ever, very few games are perfect, and despite this game's faults, it's a wonderful playthrough. Sure, the final boss isn't all that difficult, and the original 1987 version of this game would have required some sort of additional reading material, but that was part of the experience playing video games in the 80s. Do video game manuals even exist anymore? That was what you did when you were on your way home from the store with your parents. You tear into that box and read the manuals so you know what's going on for the journey ahead. Then you'd be sitting there with your Nintendo Power magazine, your manual, a Pepsi, and a bag of Doritos. That was all part of the experience, and it was awesome. Nowadays, they just bake in some clunky tutorial and send you on your way. Whatever. Anyway, that's all I've got to say about this game. Thank you for watching. Please don't text and drive, and I'll see you next time on Friday Night Arcade.